Hi, everybody. This is 7.2. This is quadratic formula. So chapter 7 is all about solving quadratic equations. In the last section, we got two options. We got square root property and we got completing the square. Quadratic formula is the third. There's good news about it and there's bad news about it. The good news is that it will work every time. If it is the only way you ever want to use, that's fine. It will work every time. That doesn't mean it's always the kindest or the easiest way. So the thing to keep in mind is that you can use it all the time, but it's also not an option to not know it. So for those of you that don't remember, here's the quadratic formula. It is one of the tiny handful fraction of things that need to be memorized for this class in terms of formulas. You do not get a formula sheet ever. So this is one that you have to get and hold on to and keep in your head. Okay, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over that whole thing divided by 2a when you're solving for x. The other trick to this is that it has to be an equation in standard form first. If the equation is not in standard form, you must put it there before you use the quadratic formula. If you don't, it won't work. Okay, or the answer will come out crazy or something crazy will happen. This is the trick. Okay, so that being said, let's try it. We want to solve this using the quadratic equation. Here's the thing, quadratic equation is always your option, but option number 1 should always be to factor. If you can just factor the regular way, either with the AC test or just figuring out the binomials. The other option to remember is square root property. Okay, and that's a little easier if you can get it to work. I would say after that, I would use quadratic formula, depending on what I'm trying to do. There will be cases later on in the semester where we go like, oh, but we need to move that around with the square root property or the completing the square first. So that being said, we're going to try this one. The first thing you need to notice, though, is it is not in standard form. So we need this to be in standard form before we can proceed. So I'm going to move the 5 over to the left. Then I'm going to make this 2x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Now I have it. So now I can think about a, which is always just the constant term in front of that variable. A is 2. It's not 2x squared in this case. It's just the constant, just the number. B is negative 3. C is negative 5. So now we can put things into our formula. It's x equals. This is us solving this equation for x. Negative 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is negative 3, minus 4 times 2 times negative 5 minus 4ac. All divided by 2 times a, which is 2. Okay? So now I'm going to do the stuff that's underneath the radical first. That's just the sort of order of operations way to do this. So negative 3 plus or minus, let's see. Negative 3 squared is 9 minus, let's see, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times negative 5 is positive 45 over 4. All right, well, let's see. 9 plus 45. Did I get 45? 8 times 5 is 40. I'm going to go. I have a little bit of a cold, so forgive me in advance that this video sounds a little ridiculous. So I have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 4. All right, well, I know the square root of 49. Square root of 49 is 7. So I have negative 3 plus or minus 7 over 4. Now, here's the thing. This is something you can figure out, and you should. So we should be figuring out negative 3 plus 7 over 4, negative 3 minus 7 over 4. Get the answers to those. Negative 3 plus 7 is 4. 4 over 4 is 1. Negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10. Negative 10 over 4 is the same as negative 5 over 2. And we're finished. Okay, you should get 2 answers to most of these. All right, so you try this one. It works exactly the same way. Same process. Make sure things are in standard form first. Figure out your A, B, and C. go from there. For this one, when you're done, you should get 4/3 and -1/2. If you have questions about it, drop into the discussion. Let's talk about them. You have to use the discussion, so you might as well use it to answer questions you actually have. All right, let's try this one. So first, the first thought in your head has got to be, this is not in standard form. So it's got to get to standard form. Okay, so distribute. I get -x² plus 6x. The 11 I'm going to move to the other side. Okay. Now, when you do one that looks like this, you can say A is -1, B is 6, C is -11. That's fine. The standard sort of like good-mannered math practice is you don't want your leading coefficient out in front of x² to be a negative. So we'd factor out a -1, that'd make it x² minus 6x plus 11 equals 0. And then I would divide by that -1, and then I'd get x² minus 6x plus 11 equals 0. Either way is going to be fine, okay? But the preferred way is to be using a positive there, a negative there, and a positive there, okay? So now quadratic formula, just like we did. X equals negative b, which is -6, plus or minus the square root of b², which is 36, minus 4 times 1 times 11, all over 2 times 1. Okay, well, I'm going to do what's in the radical first. -6 plus or minus -4 times 1 times 11 is -44. -44 and 36 is -8. And that's all going to be over 2. All right, well, I can simplify square root of -8, right? I can make that I square roots of 4 square roots of 2, so that's 2i radical 2. Okay, so I'm going to make that -6 plus or minus 2i radical 2, all divided by 2. And now in the top, there's a common term. There's a common 2, actually. So I'm going to take out a 2, make that -3 plus or minus I radical 2, divided by 2. So my final answer is going to be -3 plus or minus I roots of 2. Okay. Keep in mind, it's okay to factor out at this last step. But what you can't do is just cancel out the 2 here and the 6 here. If you don't, you would have to do it to all 3 parts. Okay. You can't just do one part. All right. Here is the next one. Again, works the same way. You need to do this practice. Okay, so for this one, let's see, I think you get -2 plus or minus 2i square roots of 2. Okay. See what you get. If you have questions, you should ask. All right. Okay. This is an application. So first, there's a story. A delivery truck travels south from Hartsville, Alabama to Birmingham. So we're going south. Okay. And then it heads east to Atlanta along Route 20, east. The distance from Birmingham to Atlanta, okay, this is B, A, and this is H. The distance from Birmingham to Atlanta is 8 miles less than twice the distance from Hartsville to Birmingham. Okay, so Hartsville to Birmingham, I don't know. Make that X. Birmingham to Atlanta, twice the distance, 8 miles less than twice the distance, so 2x minus 8. If the straight line distance from Hartsville to Atlanta is 165 miles, find the distance from Hartsville to Birmingham. All right, so this is an application of this, okay? I can, basically what I want to do is use the Pythagorean theorem, and I'm going to make myself a new slide right here. Hold on. I'm going to trace our triangle. Ooh, that's not the triangle we wanted, but hold on. Let's make that prettier. All right, so here's my triangle. Okay, it was 165. This was x. This is 2x minus 8. This is a right triangle. They went south and east. So I can use Pythagorean theorem here, okay? So I can do x squared plus a squared plus b squared, 2x minus 8 squared equals c squared, 165 squared, okay? What I have to do is FOIL that 2x minus 8. So I'm going to get x squared plus 4x squared minus 32x plus 64 equals a big number, 27,225. All right, this is just numbers now, right? So combine like terms. I get 5x squared. I'm going to move this guy over that way, minus 32x minus 2,000 or 27,161 equals 0. This is not something I have any intention of factoring. This is an example where you look at this and you go like, oh yeah, no, I totally know the factors of 27,161 and I'm going to make it 32. Not in a million years, okay? So this is an instance where you go like, quadratic formula, you are here for me. All right, and A, B, and C, so negative 32, negative B, so positive 32. Oh, I did that earlier, didn't I? I did that up here. Sorry, I'm going to flip sides. Negative B should have been a positive 6. So the answer should have been a positive 3. You probably saw that, and I didn't. Positive, so negative B, so the opposite sign, plus or minus the square root of negative 32 squared, minus 4 times 5 times that big old negative 2161, all divided by 10, 2a. All right, you can figure this out at this point. This is just calculator work. Okay, eventually you get 32 plus or minus the square root of 5, 4, 4, 2, 4, 4, all over 10. Well, in your calculator, do 32 plus that square root, divide by 10. Do 32 minus that square root, divide by 10. One of your answers is going to be positive. One of them is going to be negative, right? So the negative answer isn't going to work. We're talking about distances here. So the positive answer you should get is 76.97 miles. Okay, that's going to be x here. And then you can figure out that other distance based on that. All right. This is another similar problem. First, you need to draw the picture. Then you need to find the answer. The answer for this one should be give or take, let's see, round to the nearest tenth of a mile. If X is, let's read it. It says Steve and Tammy leave campground hiking in 2 different trails. Steve heads south. Tammy heads east. Okay. By lunchtime, they're 9 miles apart. Sorry, I should draw my triangle the opposite way. He heads south. She heads east. No, I did it again. East. By lunchtime, they are 9 miles apart. Okay. Steve walked 3 more than twice as many miles as Tammy. So X is going to be Tammy. He walked 3 more than twice as many miles. Okay. So X is going to be Tammy. The other one is going to be Steve. In this case, Tammy should go 2.8 miles, give or take. Okay. And you can figure out Steve from there. If you get stuck, you know what to do here, right? You have options. All right. Let's try another one. Let me look at my notes. All right, a model rocket is launched straight upward. So imagine launching a rocket off the ground from the top of a 144-foot cliff. The velocity is given with this, the velocity is 112 feet per second. The height of the rocket off the ground is given by this. Height, h of t, is measured in feet, and t is the time in seconds. What time is it when the rocket is 208 feet over the ground? So what they're saying is they're giving you a height, and you have to find the time. So they're giving you h of t. H of t is 208 equals 16t squared plus 112t plus 144. Well, we need this in standard form before we could get anything to do with it. 112, I missed a t. I just made plus signs. So remove that 208 over. And I'm going to get 0. equals negative 16t squared plus 11, 112t minus 64. Now here's the thing. In this world, what would be really nice is to not have to deal with big numbers. And I'm looking at these, and they all look like they're divisible by 4, but you know what? They're also all divisible by 16. So what I can do is divide everything by negative 16, everything. And it comes out much better because I get 0 equals t squared minus, I divided by a negative, 7t plus 4. Oh, well, now you look at that and you go like, can I factor it? No. Can I use the square root property? Not really. Well, then the answer is quadratic formula, okay? So we know what a, b, and c are. Negative b is positive 7 plus or minus. So x equals, sorry, plus or minus the b squared, which is 49, minus 4 times 1 times 4. Okay, all over 2 times 1, which is 2. So I get x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 16, which is 33, all over 2. Now you can figure that out. One of them is going to be, let's see, you get 2 positive answers because the square root of 33 isn't bigger than 7. One of them should be about 6.37 something. The other is 0.62. And then you have to say to yourself, like, uh-oh, 2 answers. Does that make sense here? Well, actually, it does. Because if you start at 144 feet, you shoot the rocket off, and very quickly here, it passes 208 feet. And then at a certain point, the rocket just doesn't keep flying out forever into space. It's got to come back down. So at some point, 6.5 seconds later, it's coming back down. All right. So here's the second problem that is very similar. Okay. In this case, what time does the object, how long does it take the object to hit the ground? It should be about 5.165 seconds. See if you can figure it out. One of the things that we can do with quadratic equations, in this quadratic formula in particular, is use something called the discriminant to help us figure out what kinds of answers we're going to get. This is actually a really useful tool. Basically, there's 3 situations. The discriminant is what's underneath the square root. It's that b squared minus 4ac. It just doesn't have the square root on it. So we're going to use that. If it is greater than 0, there's 2 real solutions, 2 plain old regular numbers. If it's a perfect square, your answer is 2 rational numbers. Okay? That's greater than 0. If it's not a perfect square, they're irrational. Okay? If it's less than 0, you get imaginary solutions. So you get something with an I in it. And if it happens to be equal to 0, there's only one answer. Okay? These are useful to remember. You are going to use them and have to use them to do things. So here's how it works. Oops, sorry, let me get my pages in order. It says use the discriminant to determine the type and the number of solutions. So what we do is we do b squared minus 4ac. Here, b squared is negative 5, so 25 minus 4 times 2 times 9. 25 minus, that's 8 times 9 is 72. That's going to get me negative 47. So then we go back and look. Negative 47 is not greater than 0. Negative 47 is less than 0. So 2 imaginary solutions. That's it. That's what we're figuring out. For this one, do the same thing. Has to be in standard form first, though. Always. So I get 3x squared plus x minus 2 equals 0. Well, negative b, or sorry, square root of b is just, b squared is just 1 minus 4 times negative 2 times 3. See, 1, that's positive 8 8 times 3 is 24 plus 24. I get 25. 25 is a perfect square. That was one of our choices. If your answer is a perfect square, the answer will be 2 rational numbers. So I have 2 rational solutions. You get where this is going, right? So you keep at this, okay? You try a couple. This one, got to put in standard form first, right? I think I just forgot to flip a page over. There we go. So we would get, when we put this in standard form, we get 4x squared plus 6x plus 1 equals 0. Discriminant would be b squared, so 36, minus 4 times negative 4 times 1. 36 minus plus 16 gets me 52. 52 is not a perfect square, right? But it is greater than 0. So that means 2 irrational solutions. Okay. And then this one we can calculate through. It's fine. Okay, we're going to move everything over. 3.6 x squared plus 1.2x plus 0.1 equals 0. 1.2 squared minus 4 times 3.6 times 0.1. When you calculate that all through, you're actually going to get 0. That means there is one rational solution. All right. So you get the idea of how this works here. You can go through and try it, and you should. Okay? If you get stuck, you know what to do. All right. So what we can use the discriminant to do is tell us if there are x and y intercepts. The discriminant tells us what kind of solutions we have, and that is a good step, okay? Because if there are only imaginary numbers as answers, there are no imaginary answers on the xy coordinates. So if there's no real solutions, there's no x-intercepts. So first we use discriminant. All right, so we do b squared minus 4ac. So we get negative 3 squared is 9 minus 4 times 1 times 1. That gives me 5. 5 is greater than 0. So we get 2 irrational. And those are fine. So we do have intercepts. That's cool. And if they exist, what we do is we use the quadratic formula to find them. So we do negative positive 3 plus or minus. We already know what goes under there, so it's 5. Square root of 5 over 2 times 1 is 2. And then we can figure out 3 plus the square root of 5 divided by 2. 3 minus the square root of 5 divided by 2. Okay? That gets you something like 2.62. That gets you something like 0.38. So the x-intercepts are 2.6 or so and 0. And the x-intercept is 3.38, pardon me, and 0. From there, the only thing we have to do left is figure out the y-intercept of that function. The y-intercept happens when x equals 0. So we put in 0 where we see x. So 0 squared minus 3 times 0 plus 1 just equals 1. So the y-intercept is at 0, 1. That's how this works, okay? You try one. Use the discriminant, then use the quadratic formula if there are intercepts. Then find the y-intercept. For this case, there are 2 x-intercepts. They are at negative 0.44 and 0, and negative 4.56 and 0. And then the y-intercept is at 0 and 2. Okay. All right. This is another example. Okay. So use a discriminant, determine if there are x-intercepts. So let's see. Negative b squared is 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times 1. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. Negative 7 is less than 0. which means they're imaginary. So there's no x-intercepts. There are no imaginary numbers on the coordinate plane. We can't graph things that don't exist. So they don't exist, there's none. But we can find the y-intercept. Just because there's not x-intercepts doesn't mean there's not y-intercepts. So put in 0 for x squared, 0 for x plus 2. That's going to be a 2, so the y-intercept is going to be at 0, 2. This means this graph crosses the y-axis and not the x. That's okay. You can try this one also. Let's see. There's going to be no x-intercepts. And the y-intercept is going to be at 0 and 5. All right. So here's like a rundown on the choices. When we want to solve a quadratic equation, we can factor and use a zero product rule. This is the best case, right? This is the one we want to use if we get that option. Option 2 is the square root prosperity. If we need to complete the square, we should do that. It's good if you have something that looks like this, or if it's something that works out easily, okay? Option 3, that works every time, all cases, is the quadratic formula. So do that. It's okay. You use it when you look at it and go like, I don't know how to factor that, and the square root property doesn't going to work, so I'm going to move on. Go ahead. All right. So what's going to happen here and in the homework is that you can solve them using any old way you like. The first trick in every case is to put them in standard form. So put them in standard form first. We're just going to do the standard form and then the decision making. You guys can do the rest. All right, so standard form here is x squared plus, let's see, 6x plus 9 plus x squared minus 9x minus 8 equals 0. Let's see, those guys, 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. That looks 2 times 1 is 3. So I can, okay. So in this case, I would use the AC test. 2 times 1 is 2. I can break this apart and make 2 negative. I can rewrite this, x squared minus 2x minus 1x plus 1 equals 0, and then I can factor by groups. Okay, then it's done. This one, try. This one is very similar to that one. This is another case of the AC test, would be the ideal way to go. It doesn't mean the quadratic formula won't work. And if that's the way you want to go, that's fine. Okay, let's try this one. This is a case where, like, I'm going to move some stuff around so I could put the x on the other side. So I could use the quadratic formula. It's not a fast factor, but I could also, oh, that's plus. I could also complete the square here pretty easily because half of 2 squared is just 1. Half of 2 is 1, 1 squared. So all I would have to do is add 1 to both sides. Okay, because I added 1 there. And then I'd get x plus 1 squared equals -4. And this actually works out pretty well. So that's what I would do here. This one is an even b, so I would do the same thing. I would use completing the square here. And then here you look at it and you go like, ooh, what is this? Well, clear out the fractions first, friends. Use the least common denominator. The least common denominator here is, what is it? Let's see. It's 12. Okay, so let's multiply everything by 12 first. Everything. And then let's see where we stand. We got 3x squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. Well, 3 times 4 is 12. There's no way to break up a 12 to eat. That doesn't actually work. For AC tests, this is not an easy completing the square kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula. That's fine. If you look at it and you go like, meh, quadratic formula, do that. This is another case where you do exactly the same thing. The least common denominator here is 10. We get 2x squared minus 2 times 8x plus 5 equals 0. It's not a pretty thing to factor, so I'm not going to. I'm going to use the quadratic formula. That's fine. And then this guy at the end, let's see. Well, this is actually a pretty easy fix, right? I get 9p squared over here equals 11. Divide by 9. I get p squared equals 11 over 9. Well, I'm just going to take square root of both sides, so I'm going to use the square root property. P equals plus or minus the square root of 11 over 9. So here's the thing. Could I have used the quadratic formula here? Absolutely. It will always work. Sometimes there's something a little simpler, especially if there's no y term like there is in this case. Square root property is the way to go. So this is a little bit of a longer section. There's a lot in it. So take your time, work through it, practice, ask your questions as you have them, and I will talk to you guys in the next section.